In this video, we're watching the Gulf for potential tropical activity over the next several days, and we're also watching the main development region for growing signs of activity. Things are likely to heat up over the next couple weeks. I'm about to show you the latest information on the tropics, but first, please be sure to hit that subscribe button for more tropical weather updates. Here's a look at the tropical Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific right now, and there's not really anything happening. The NHC shows no tropical cyclone activity expected in the next 7 days across the Atlantic or the Eastern Pacific. So nothing in terms of tropical activity that they're looking at. There are a couple of storm systems that could try to do something, not necessarily developing into a tropical storm, but things are going to start getting more active over the next couple of weeks especially. And then as we head into August and September, definitely things will be heating up then. Here's a look at the GFS model showing that you could see that there's a tropical wave right here, a pretty decent tropical wave actually moving through the main development region. But then actually notice what happens. Over the next few days, it actually falls apart. It's actually running into wind shear and dry air that's really going to destroy it. Then we have another storm system. We're watching the Gulf and the east coast of the U.S. for another potential storm system, especially around Florida. Maybe a storm tries to organize there off of a frontal boundary and disconnects from the frontal system and tries to become more of a tropical cyclone. That has a slight chance of forming somewhere between June 15th and June 20th, perhaps, according to the GFS model, really June 16th or June 17th, and then it actually falls apart, and it really doesn't do anything in this run of the GFS. There are previous runs that have shown a more significant storm system, but the chance of that is not necessarily super high, but just something to watch. Then notice what happens going towards July 25th. There's a storm system off of, it disconnects from a frontal system, and then it's over the subtropical Atlantic, and it could potentially try to become a tropical system. And that's definitely possible with how warm the central subtropical Atlantic is, with sea surface temperatures actually warmer there than in the main development region. And notice the intertropical convergence zone is actually still suppressed, even going into July 25th. It's still suppressed very far south. So that's something pretty interesting. And so not much activity happening there, but that could actually change as we head into August. Part of the reason why a lot of these tropical waves are not able to do anything is, of course, the wind shear. As you notice, there's extreme wind shear, especially over the Caribbean and the western part of the Atlantic. It's like a wall of wind shear just blocking anything that tries to head towards the Caribbean. That plus the steering patterns are not necessarily favorable for pushing tropical storms into an area that's favorable for development. That shear actually does lessen at times, but then it does come back. Even as far out as July 26th, the Caribbean is extremely sheared, and that's going to prevent any activity. So really, the best chance for a tropical system would be somewhere in the Gulf or off the east coast of the U.S. over the next week or two. And also, there's a lot of dry air, especially in the main development region. Is you can see that all this dry air that's really interfering with any tropical waves, they're not going to be able to really form into anything. And that dry air stays in place for quite a while, even though the Saharan dust is not extremely thick like last year or the year before that. It's a lot thinner, but still there's a lot of dry air that's not favorable for much of anything to form. And then, of course, a big thing is going to be the intertropical convergence zone is extremely suppressed, even going all the way into July 27th. According to the GFS model, it's very suppressed far to the south. So that's really keeping a lot of activity out of the main development region. Now, the GEFS ensembles are also showing potential development from a storm system in the Gulf. They're showing low pressure forming around July 14th. So in the next 3 days or so, Monday night, going into Tuesday, July 15th, And then even Wednesday, July 16th, the latest run of the GEFS is showing some activity around the Gulf Coast. So there is slight potential for this to form, but I don't think that it's very likely, but it's just something to watch. And then we'll have to see what happens after that. But also, here's the Euro model not showing anything for the Gulf over the next several days, or anywhere else for that matter. But what it is showing, once you go towards July 26th, it is showing more tropical waves coming off the coast of Africa, heading into that main development region, and potentially heading towards the Caribbean. And it looks pretty weak right now, but they are showing more activity as we go towards the end of July, going into August, which would make sense just based on climatology and over the next several weeks. The Climate Prediction Center actually on Tuesday, July 8th, put this out. They have a 20% chance of tropical development highlighted in the Gulf for week 2, July 16th to July 22nd. And some of the models were showing something forming around July 19th, July 20th. Now they're showing July 16th, July 17th. And this may not do anything at all, but it is an area with some potential. Now, the Eastern Pacific was active a couple weeks ago, and now it's really not. Like, there's a whole bunch of nothing. We have a tropical disturbance around July 14th to 16th, but it's not really doing anything. And then we have maybe a couple other weak low-pressure systems, but nothing actually forming into a tropical cyclone. So the GFS has nothing, not even anything expected in the Eastern Pacific all the way through July 27th. So nothing happening there. Just have to watch the Atlantic more so for opportunities for development. Here's a look at the MJO, and right now it is highly unfavorable. So we're not really expecting much of anything right now, or even next week, or July 16th, they're not really showing anything. They're showing highly unfavorable conditions. But here's where things do change dramatically. Things completely change for the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic going into July 21st and July 26th. We have favorable conditions now over the Eastern Pacific and the western part of the Atlantic with the MJO. Definitely something to watch there, where things will be more favorable for a tropical system. And then once we go towards the end of July, going to August, it goes back to neutral, but this part of the forecast right here is definitely subject to change for sure. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But we do know that, yeah, the CFS model is definitely showing more favorable MJO conditions moving into the Eastern Pacific and part of the Atlantic, starting around July 21st, going all the way into July 26th. And then another big thing is the sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic. This is the wild part. Sea surface temperatures are very warm, especially across the central subtropical Atlantic. There are sea surface temperatures in the mid-80s at 35 degrees north. Even 80-degree water temperatures now extend north of 40 degrees latitude. So that's impressive. How above average these temperatures are is impressive. And this part of the Atlantic is actually warmer than the main development region itself. Like, the main development region, if you look at it, it's barely like 26 to 28 degrees Celsius. That's low 80s. The central subtropical Atlantic, around Bermuda basically, is in the mid 80s, 85, even almost 86 degrees in some areas. And this actually warmed up quite a bit just over the past few days. So this is extremely significant. And then we have upper 80s, close to 90 degrees in the Gulf around Louisiana, and even the Gulf Coast around Mississippi and Alabama. This is some very warm sea surface temperatures that would be very favorable for tropical systems. We just have a lot of sheer, dry air, and really things not really lining up for tropical activity. But if we were to get a lot of tropical systems moving through some of these water temperatures, they could intensify pretty quickly. And that's why I'd also think that this area is an area to watch for some quick forming tropical systems that form from frontal systems that start to separate from those fronts and get more tropical characteristics. And then, yeah, if we look at the sea surface temperature anomalies, this is like, wow, you could definitely see that this area of the Atlantic is on fire compared with the rest of the Atlantic, which is actually only slightly above average and in some places slightly below average by a little bit. The main development region, it does look like it has warmed up a little bit, but it's still like just barely above average, even slightly below average in some places. The Gulf is pretty warm, but not nearly as above average as the central part of the Atlantic. And then if you look at the upper ocean heat content, this is where you can really see it, how far north this upper ocean heat content extends off the east coast of the US, even north of Bermuda and everything. So this could support hurricane activity very far to the north too. And this could affect the east coast of the US, also Atlantic Canada. All these areas should really be looking at that too, as well as the Caribbean, the Gulf Coast, Central America, the Southeast, all looking at a lot of tropical cyclone heat potential, a lot of energy for tropical storms and hurricanes. The main development region is not very impressive compared to the Central Atlantic, the Caribbean, the Gulf, all of these regions. Here's a look at the CFS model, a long-range outlook of what things could look like over the next month, perhaps. And we see this tropical wave in the main development region, but that falls apart. Then we start seeing other tropical waves starting to move towards the Caribbean as we get towards the end of July. So this is the end of July going into August. Definitely want to watch the main development region. You see a tropical wave headed towards the Caribbean, and this is not an exact forecast or anything, just a general idea of what the weather pattern could look like. And that could try to turn into a tropical system, recurving towards the east coast of the US, perhaps, and then that meanders around Bermuda, perhaps, but then notice more systems moving into the Caribbean. And this is where things start to heat up as we go into August with several tropical storm systems, and then you could see just more activity after that going all the way perhaps into August 12th. And that's the end of the forecast model. So yeah, definitely some things to watch in the tropics. Nothing over the next several days expected, but over the next couple weeks going into August, there's definitely a lot of activity that's possible. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked this video, please be sure to hit the like button if you haven't already. Share the video and make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more weather updates on the tropics. Thanks for watching. Extreme Weather Zone, out.